The History Things podcast is brought to you by G.A.R. Historical, your one-stop shop for all your historical fan gear needs. Visit grhistorical.com and use the promo code HISTORYTHINGS to receive 10% off your next purchase. Thanks for listening. Now let's start the show.
Are you ready?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the History Things podcast. I'm your host, Pat McGuire. Joining me today at the beginning of a brand new year, 2021, is my co-host with the most. You know him, you love him, author, historian, park ranger, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Matt Borders. Welcome to season 2. How you doing, bud?
Oh, I'm doing great, Pat. Welcome to yourself to season 2.
Woo-hoo!
We're excited to be here, folks. It's going to be a big season for us, and we're going to start it off in a big way, too, because we've got a national topic to discuss today here at the beginning of season 2. We have the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War to talk to us tonight, and to help us with that, we have the National Patriotic Instructor, Brother Ben Frail, has joined us today. Ben, how are you today, sir?
I'm great. How are you guys doing?
Doing awesome, man. Thanks for hanging out with us. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yeah, thank you for having us. How was your holiday?
Our holidays were good. I know we had a nice, quiet one with the family. Where are you guys? You're coming out of Rhode Island. You guys hunkering down there and enjoying the holidays up there?
Yeah, we're hunkering down, but Santa made it through. The boys made out like bandits. So that's my 3-year-old and my 5-year-old. They made it out like bandits. So, they're happy.
Santa had busy work to do this year. Got to bring that good cheer everywhere.
Yeah, oh, for sure. We needed it.
Yes, absolutely. Now, Ben, we're going to jump right into it. We've got some pretty in-depth questions for you today, and I really want you to dive deep with us, to really let us know about this organization, because it dates back to almost the war itself, and it comes out of the war through a different organization entirely. But the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War are the heirs to an older veterans organization, the Grand Army of the Republic. Could you tell us about the G.A.R. and who they were before we get into you guys?
Yeah, of course. So the G.A.R., the Grand Army of the Republic, was the largest veterans organization to come out of, Union veterans organization to come out of the American Civil War. You had to have honorably served in the Union Armed Forces. At the time was Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and Revenue Cutter service. All were eligible to join. It was formed in 1866, and it's the GAR's first commander-in-chief was Benjamin Stevenson. And yeah, he served in that position from April of 66 to November of 66. And their role was just, once the war ended, they were missing that camaraderie, that fraternal nature of serving together. So they would meet, they created G.A.R. halls, some of which are still standing today, where they would meet. They would just, discuss BS, if you will, with each other. But they'd also do things like create Decoration Day, which is now Memorial Day.
I think I've seen a G.A.R. hall in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, driving around up there. I think there's one of the old G.A.R. halls still standing there.
Well, the town I grew up next to, the G.A.R. hall's still standing. Yeah. Wonderful little structure.
Exactly. A lot of them are beautiful. There's one in Michigan that is, if you ever get a chance to get out to Detroit, it's in there and it's absolutely gorgeous. It looks like a castle. And one of the other, we're called, not to get off too much on a tangent, but the SUVCW and the other allied orders of the GAR, one of the female groups, they did a lot of work to preserve and protect that building from the city of Detroit taking it over. So if you ever get a chance to go to Detroit, get out there and see their G.A.R. Hall.
Matt,
I've actually seen that.
I was going to say, Matt's from Michigan. Did you ever make it out there?
Yes, I have seen that hall. And we're going to actually ask about the Allied orders here in a little bit as well. So you'll have a chance to kind of expound on that too.
Awesome.
You love Michigan.
I do love Michigan. In fact, it was Marshall, Michigan has the G.A.R. Hall that's still standing that I grew up near, and they've got a wonderful little museum in there. So quick shout out to the folks there in Marshall.
So following the Civil War, the G.A.R. is not really the only game in town. When it comes to like veteran style organizations, obviously you have the Mullis organization, more regimental level things like the Iron Brigade Association, stuff like that.
Yep.
Was there like competition between these organizations for like membership, or like, be in my group, no, be in my group? Or have you found that these groups were more or less like supportive of each other and sometimes maybe collaborative?
Everything that I've seen has been the latter. They work together. They were collaborative. Membership, everyone tries to get more and more members, but a lot of the guys, like you said, like Mullis you had to be an officer to be in Mullis. You couldn't be an enlistment. But a lot of like here in Rhode Island, the first department commander for the G.A.R. in Rhode Island was Ambrose Burnside.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
Yep.
So
Hometown
there
boy.
you go. Obviously he was an officer. He was in both Mullis and the G.A.R. And then you've got, as you mentioned, the regimental brigade level organizations that they were all members of. It seemed as if they were members of whatever they could be members of. They missed that fraternal gathering, that camaraderie, and that's what those organizations brought back to them.
Could you be a member of multiple organizations? Could you be like a G.A.R. member and an Iron Brigade or Mullis member?
Yep. Yeah, you could there, and you'll actually see it if you look at the old photos. You'll see guys that will have multiple membership badges on, and we'll sit there and we'll zoom in. Thank goodness for modern technology. We'll zoom the picture in, and we'll be like, okay, like, oh, this guy was in the Army of the Potomac Association, also in the G.A.R. He was also in Mullis, and we can tell that just from the badges he's wearing on his chest.
Right.
So.
Well, and the obituaries too are huge for that. They're oftentimes listing multiple fraternal organizations these guys are involved in when they're beginning to pass away in the late 19th, early 20th century. And many of those are these military fraternal orders. Was
there a hierarchy to them? Like, is sort of like if you were a G.A.R. member, but like also like Mullis, like it's like you have meetings on the same day. It's like, like G.A.R.'s got like, I got to go to that one more than the other or something like that.
I mean, not that I'm aware of. I think it would be more of a personal decision. If you're in, if you were a post commander for the G.A.R., but just a regular member of Mullis, the G.A.R. would obviously take more precedence. Whereas if you were, a post commander for Mullis, but a regular member of the G.A.R., the Mullis meeting would be more important to you. So I think it was more a personal preference. There really wasn't much of a hierarchy that I've seen. But like I said, the G.A.R. was the biggest one. Sure. So that one was the most well-known, probably the one with the most prestige at that time period.
Hell of a voting power, too, there towards the late 19th century.
Yeah. So there were, I believe it was 5 Republican candidates that made it to president, or that became president, I should say, during the life of the G.A.R. Every single one of them was backed by the G.A.R.
Wow.
Back then, they did have some political clout, which is completely different from us today in the SUVCW. But
so that's a great setup, because I was literally going to ask you. I was like, so obviously the G.A.R. has strong ties to national politics, and especially at its height. We were just literally talked about how many presidents they ended up backing. Is this true for the SUV today as well? Are the Sons of Union veterans in the modern context involved in politics or veterans affairs now?
We stay out of it. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, so we actually have to stay out of it legally.
Sure.
But we open ourselves to focus on brothers who love the Civil War. In today's society, politics is too much of a divide. So even internally, we don't talk about it, just because of the fact that we want to focus on the mission. We want to focus on keeping the memory of the boys in blue alive, as we call it, keep green the memory. So to me, listen, I personally, I don't want to know because I just want to make sure that you're there in a cemetery helping me clean up a cemetery, or you're going to go to a school and teach the new generation of kids what these boys went through and what their sacrifice was and why their sacrifice was so important. Right. So doing the work is to us what's more important, and
do you
sticking
know
to the mission.
Roughly when in the timeline that sort of transitioned as far as organizational focus, like with the G.A.R. being so politically involved and then the SUV being more charitably involved? Like, did that sort of happen with the last veteran passing, or like the twilight years? Like, was there like a crossover in these organizations? Because I know you guys are listed as like the legal heir. So like taking over the legacy, was there like a cross dissolve for like filming purposes? Was there a blending effect?
We actually have a deed of conveyance from the last living G.A.R. member when he passed away in 1954, I believe it was.
Yeah, I thought it was the 50s. Yeah,
1954. I just want to get his Albert Wilson. Oh, sorry, 1956. Was when he passed away.
That's the year my mom was born.
And that's alive by that point.
My dad's alive already too, but I mean,
and that's a massive thing that a lot of people don't realize is that, you know, if you talk to, I'm 32. You know, my grandparents were alive when Civil War veterans were alive.
Yeah, man, mine too.
We're not that far removed from this conflict, and I don't think people today realize that. But there was an actual deed of conveyance that Albert Wilson signed over to the SUVCW, making us the legal heir. So there was that, you know, like you said, that movie Fade Away. Like there is an actual legal document that makes us the legal heir to the G.A.R.
So with that deed of conveyance, Ben, how does the Sons of Union Veterans actually develop? That's something that's already kind of happening in the G.A.R. before it is turned over to the SUV. So how does the SUV really come about?
So in 1881, the G.A.R. They realized, hey, we have a finite life expectancy. You have to be a member to join this organization, you have to be a veteran to join this organization. Well, eventually all the veterans are going to die. And then who's going to keep our memory alive?
Right.
When we're all gone, who's going to keep our memory alive? They realized this, and thankfully they realized it early on in the existence of the G.A.R. I mean, you're talking 15 years, just about 15 years after the G.A.R. was formed. They're forming at the time what was called the SUV, the Sons of Union Veterans. So it was to work with them, Memorial Day activities, things of that nature. There early on, believe it or not, the SUV was more of a militia type, where they would go out and they would have weekend encampments and they would be drilling and things of that nature. And we've evolved over the years to be where we are today, where it is, hey, we're going out, we're performing dedication ceremonies at monuments, we're cleaning up cemeteries, where one of our biggest jobs is we have a national graves registration database where we're trying to find every single resting spot of a veteran, of the Civil War veterans.
That's awesome.
It's an immense task.
Absolutely.
And in the past 10, 15 years, the database has come a long way. My father is also in the organization. He was the National Graves Registration Officer for 11 years. And the database while he was in charge of it, I think he said the last time I talked to him, it grew by 10 times it grew.
Wow. You said all Civil War veterans or just Union veterans?
Union Civil War veterans is what we're focusing on.
Okay.
And it's tough because you got the unknowns. You've got even you go to Gettysburg and it's, unknown Rhode Island soldier, unknown Wisconsin soldier. So those are going to be tough. But we've actually been working with companies that if we sit there and we say, hey, we've got 2 or 3 unknowns in bodies that we actually have, we think because of research, it might be, Private John Doe and Sergeant, John Smith. Okay, look, do we have their ancestors? Let's run a DNA test. We've got companies that we're working with that'll actually do that for us. So we're, but it's, it takes a lot of time.
I would imagine, especially when you got to like cross-reference, like, you're like just a muster sheet, like before and after a battle, or because they're not always the most reliable pieces of paper.
Oh no,
things like that. I researched a guy that was missing from like 2 muster sheets right after a battle, but then showed up on like a 3rd one, like 6 weeks later. And he wasn't in any hospitals or anything. It just like, was like, they were forgetting to write his name. Like, I don't know. He just doesn't appear on one.
Well, then not only that, but like, and I found this with my ancestor that served, is the different spellings of the last names or the first names, because it was, okay, like with my ancestors, it's, okay, Hugh Frail. Okay, well, you have F-R-A-I-L, how I spell it. And then there's F-R-E-I-L, F-R-I-L-E, F-R-A-I-L-E, and all these different, okay, because you're just saying it. So it's up to the person who's writing it down how they think it was spelt. But yeah, so it is definitely, like you said, not the most reliable at times. We were actually able to, and this is one of my proudest moments in the organization, in the early 2000s, I think it was 2004, 2005, one of the roads that connects the main highway to the airport, they had a small mudslide, if you will, because of we got a lot of rain that year. It unearthed 69 bodies.
Wow!
Because we found out in the 70s that the state just plowed right over the pauper cemetery, the state's old pauper cemetery.
Shocking.
We found out beyond a shadow of a doubt that 3 of them were veterans. Only one, beyond the shadow of the doubt, we could say that, okay, these bones belongs to this veteran.
Wow.
And we actually had a reinterment ceremony for him.
Nice.
At one of the G.A.R. plots, the G.A.R. plot 1 in Providence. It's one of the biggest cemeteries in Rhode Island. And the G.A.R. guys knew, hey, we're gonna come across guys that when they die, they can't afford to be buried. So they bought plots of land in cemeteries so that these guys could have a final resting place. Mm-hmm. So we were able to get him interred into that G.A.R. plot, and full military honors. The National Guard came out, provided the chaplain, firing detail, the flag draped coffin, presented that we unfortunately couldn't find next to kin. Mm-hmm. So they presented the flag, the folded flag to one of the ladies' organizations, presented it to them. But it was just a very moving ceremony, and those are the things that we do. Those are the things that, like I said, to this day, it's probably the most moving ceremony that I've ever been a part of.
Wow, that's awesome, man!
That's amazing.
And that's sort of like if you think it's a more modern day kind of mantra, but like the no one gets left behind mentality. Exactly. Like we're talking about men that fought and died for our country here 150, 160 years ago. And, finding a bit of grace and honor, a sesquicentennial later, would never forget. And that's fantastic. Couple things real fast. One, with your talking about a highway blitzing through a historic area, that is now the second time in like 60 days we've put out an episode where we've dropped that some highway administration blitzed a historic area. So stop doing that, municipalities. Secondly, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I just want to side pivot if you're willing or able. Can you tell us a little bit about your Civil War ancestor? Maybe some of what his experience was like?
So I actually have 3.
Nice.
2 on my mom's side, 1 on my dad's side. Richard.
At length, go. Tell us as much as you want about all of them.
Okay.
Go.
All right. So Richard Handy, he served in a New York unit, and he was more sick than he was in the ranks. And believe it or not, this is another small world scenario where we thought that the first Handy to be in Rhode Island was my grandfather, because they're from New York. So we're like, oh yeah, my grandfather went to the University of Rhode Island, met my grandmother, married, had 5 kids, one being my mom, and so on and so forth. That was the first time he was in Rhode Island. Doing research on Richard, we found out that no, he was actually discharged from Portsmouth Grove Naval Hospital in Portsmouth, Rhode Island. Oh, he was discharged from the Army in Rhode Island. So it was like Holy Toledo moment. It was really kind of cool to see. His brother, John, served in the New York Sharpshooters, served throughout, he joined in 63, I believe, after Gettysburg, and then served the duration of the war. We haven't found much on him as far as, like we know he wasn't wounded. We know that, but we haven't done any deep dives into like the unit regimental histories or the regimental books to see what he's gone through. The one ancestor that we do have a lot on is Hugh, my 4 times great grandfather on my dad's side, served in the 67th Pennsylvania, was captured at the Second Battle of Winchester, paroled, came back, captured at the Wilderness because, he loved those Confederate summer camps so much. So we know that he was.
Sorry, you broke my co-host.
Dude, that was good. That was good. I wasn't expecting that. Well done.
But yeah, no. So he was. He somehow damaged his eye. We don't know if it was his barrel that breached, the part next to him whose barrel breached. But that's how he ended up getting captured at the Wilderness, was that something happened to his eye and he was wounded or he was injured in the face. Got sent to Andersonville.
Oh God. Yeah. The worst summer camp.
Yeah. Yeah. The worst of the worst. Survives there and then was eventually got out of the prison camps and went to a Union hospital in Philadelphia, where he met his second wife, who was a nurse there. My line of the family actually doesn't come from the second wife; it comes from his first wife, because he was straight off the boat Irish.
One of my people.
Yes, and it's kind of a tragic story, if you will, where he was a laborer in Ireland. His wife was a secretary and was sleeping with her boss. And so he said, okay, I'm leaving, and came to America.
Dude, we're such a cliche people. Like we're just we're all laborers. We've all got these really like sharp and sad pasts. And we're like, you know what? New life. Let's go, America.
Yeah. And, but the cool part of the story is that, the guy who my great grandmother was sleeping with, she ended up marrying. He ended up adopting all of my great grandfathers and great aunts and uncles. Let them keep the Frail name, which is why we still have the Frail name. And then also, because they were Irish and he was English, developed a family crest so that they could pass off as English.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, so it's a cool end to the story for my ancestors who were Hugh Senior's son, Hugh Jr., and so on and so forth, and his brothers and sisters. But Hugh Senior, it paved the way for him to come over and then eventually serve in the Army. And we know he was in a G.A.R. post in Pennsylvania. I don't remember which one off the top of my head. But yeah, no. So that, and he eventually died in the early 1900s, I believe.
Wow.
So
that's a lot of life to live through.
Yeah.
That's a heck of a story.
Yep. So, but the cool things that you see is when you're going through the documents and it's, oh yeah, you read he's 5'7". And I'm like, okay, well, we didn't get our height from him because every Frail, with the exception of my brother, is over 6 foot.
I'm so jealous, all you tall guys.
But you see the things like that. It's like to be able to say, okay, yep, blue eyes, 5'7", fair complexion, and you can get through these documents a kind of feeling or a sense of who they, what they looked like, because we don't have any photographs of them. So,
descriptive books.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. And that's where we know, like I said, we know how big, we also know that when he entered Andersonville, he was 145 pounds, 50 pounds. I think it was 150 pounds, and he was in the 70s when he got out.
Cool. So that was 145 pounds was me in 7th grade. I was freaking.
I was gonna say like that was me. 7th grade probably.
Yeah. I mean, like 70 pounds. I was like 8, 9 years old. Like I was. Jesus.
To drop that much weight in a relatively short amount of time, that is horrifying.
Yeah. People forget. Andersonville was not like an entire war thing. I think it was open less than a year. It was an operation.
Yeah, and he went, like I said, he was sent there from in May of 64 after the Wilderness, and I want to say November or December of 64 was when he was admitted to the hospital in Philadelphia. So he, to lose that amount of weight in 8 months is insane.
When did he enlist again? I don't remember if you said or not.
62.
62. So is he part of the Antietam and Fredericksburg campaigns? I asked because those are a bit of a hometowner campaigns for Matt and I to talk about pretty regularly.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head if he. I don't think his unit was at Antietam because they were at Winchester. They were protecting Winchester, and that's when they got captured. Was on the way to Gettysburg during Lee's Gettysburg campaign.
Milroy's boys down there at Winchester.
Exactly. Yep. So his I think they said 75% of his command of the 67th was captured at Winchester. Like they lost a lot. A lot of guys got captured at that battle from the 67th. So, but yeah, no. Fredericksburg, I would have to take a look at but I don't remember off the top of my head if they were there.
That'd be pretty neat just to follow them through. Sure. That's kind of what I'm doing. I have like an ongoing project with a Canadian First World War soldier, and a lot of the way because he didn't leave like a personal like reminiscence and things like that. So like a lot of what I'm doing to help build out his experience is just follow his unit and follow like the company records and things like that and build like an environment around him. So, kind of figuring out where he'd be in Fredericksburg would probably be pretty cool. We'd be willing to help anytime you need. Let us know, especially Matt here. Matt's a staunch researcher. Matt spends a lot of time. Matt actually spent some time in one of the Sons of Union Veterans research centers. I know that you're a big fan of that.
Yeah. Quick shout out to the Ben Harrison camp, number 356 out of Indianapolis. They have a wonderful research website that I have used a lot. Just a great way to access the ORs very quickly online. I've really enjoyed their stuff and the work they've been doing.
Awesome. Some of the camps do, that's what they focus on is getting those things digitized and getting them in a form where researchers can use them, because that's part of our mission too, is making this stuff accessible to people.
Excellent. So, in a way, you could kind of view that as like knowledge charity, because people just, don't seem to have enough of it. And like some places charge for it. So like just making it accessible in and of itself is a charitable act. So with that, can you tell us a little bit more specifically about some of the charitable work that the Sons of Union Veterans engages in?
So I've touched on it a little bit before. We clean up cemeteries. We will replace headstones. We'll work with the VA to get new VA headstones if a veteran needs an updated headstone or their headstone's broken or they just don't have a headstone at all. We'll go into schools and we'll do education programs on the Civil War and what the one that I do is what it's like to live like a second Rhode Islander throughout the war.
Great regiment, great unit.
Yeah, yep. And that's the unit that I reenact, and I bring in all my gear, and I let the kids wear it. I go in khakis and a polo, and then I let them wear it, so they get a little bit of firsthand experience. So
they're like, what's that smell? You're like, it's called campaign.
Exactly.
A new fragrance.
Yeah.
Afterwards, I tell them, oh, yeah, by the way, it's been probably 6 months since that undershirt's been washed.
Campaign. Ben Frail.
Oh, they must love that, though, because Pat and I do similar public intern programs. We're both with First Living History Battalion, which does living history events. And then Pat and I ourselves have done a lot of the going into schools and places like that, usually with the kit on.
What do we call, like, the haversack talks?
Yeah, haversack talk, exactly. Yep. So, yeah, we're big fans of that sort of interpretation. So excellent work.
Yeah, it is. And it's... When I get it's, I've been doing that I started doing it at my alma mater at Coventry High School. I've been going there. I've been teaching that same program there since I was a sophomore there, when we go over
nice
US history. And it literally started where I went to the teacher. I was like, hey, I need some extra credit. I can't fail. So I don't want to fail off the football team. Can I, can I go and can I teach on the Civil War? I reenacted. I've been studying it since I was 6 years old.
So I got to hit the brakes for a minute. You just mentioned football, and you're from New England.
Yep.
Patriots fan?
Nope.
Oh,
Carolina Panthers.
Random. So random.
Carolina Panthers. So it's my brother. So I'm the youngest of three. And my brother is obsessed with expansion teams. So, like, he's a Colorado Rockies fan. He's a Carolina Panthers fan. And, 95 was when the Panthers was their first season. Obviously, they were in the works a couple of years beforehand. And I was 6 or 7 years old. I wanted to be just like my big brother. So, I became a Panthers fan. And I've been a Panthers fan ever since. My favorite football player to this day is Dan Morgan. So
you've endured some brutal years as a football fan.
Yeah.
Well, you come by it honestly. At least you're not a fair weather fan.
Yeah. It was that 2003 Super Bowl where they played the Patriots. That was me and my brother were in a basement full of Patriot fans, and so it was that was a rough one. But yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it was tough in the early thousands. I mean, I'm in a couple of Facebook groups now where they actually live stream the game, so I can actually watch the game. Because I only get maybe 2 or 3 games up here when they're on nationally, or everything's the Patriots, or now that Brady's with the Bucks. Like, I'll be able to, I got to watch him when he played the Bucks because they play everything Brady.
Touchdown Tommy is down in Tampa now.
Yeah, exactly. So,
well, full disclosure, man, I'm a Giants fan. That's why I was getting ready to be like, hey, I need to tell you something real quick before we continue. You're a Pats fan. I am a Giants fan. So unlike the Panthers, we avenged you guys and everybody else that lost to the Patriots. We did that for you.
House divided. Nice.
Yeah.
The flag and yep. So my wife is a Patriots fan.
Nice.
But yeah, and everyone else. Actually, no. The only Patriots fan in the household I grew up in was my mom. My dad and my sister are Cowboys fans. So.
Ew.
Well, they were America's team there in the 90s. I can kind of see.
Look, I don't mind saying controversial things on our show. I mean, we started our very first show with the Civil War was absolutely directly related to the institution of slavery. I will say something less controversial now, but I'm a Giants fan. Sorry, Dallas listeners, but the Cowboys suck.
So
and there goes Texas. Thank you, Pat.
The reason why, so
they do suck.
My dad is my dad was born in 61. Right. Both the Cowboys and the Patriots were around in the 60s, or they started in 1960. Well, in 72, so my dad was 11. My grandfather got him a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader calendar, and ever since then he's been a Cowboys fan. So
that's fair. I gotta say,
that's a strong sales tactic. I could go down the football rabbit hole forever, and things like that. So with football being sort of a fraternal thing, right? It makes it breaks us, it brings us together, it tears us apart. You could argue that they're sometimes, like in your house, right? There's their own Civil War rivalries. You got two teams represented and all that stuff. The Sons of Union Veterans is a fraternal organization, and it sort of it works a lot, I guess. How do I put this? Can you, I guess, tell us a little bit about the other 4 organizations that make up the overall Allied Order of the Grand Army of the Republic? You know, the larger team, like the NFL league y'all play in?
Yeah. So, like you said, we're the Allied Orders of the Grand Army of the Republic. There's 4 female organizations and 1 male organization. The 1 male one is the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War. There's also the auxiliary to the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War, which is the ladies' version of the SUVCW. They're the ones that, when we have our national encampments, we actually have, we schedule them on the same weekend. So we're doing those things together. There's the Daughters of the Union Veterans of the Civil War. There is the Ladies of the Grand Army of the Republic, and there is the Women's Relief Corps. Of those 4, the oldest 2 are the Women's Relief Corps and the Ladies of the Grand Army of the Republic, who actually worked hand in hand with the Grand Army of the Republic when they were first formed. So the origins of the Women's Relief Corps and the Ladies of the G.A.R. were the wives of the soldiers and the sisters of the soldiers. All 5 of us, like you said, we work together. In Rhode Island, there's the auxiliary is the one that is active. There's not, the other 3 aren't active in this area anymore. So I work mostly with the auxiliary, but in other areas in the Midwest, all 4 are active. So all groups work together to try to, in one way or another, to fulfill our mission.
Now, you've been talking a lot about the national organization as a whole. The SUV, though, the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War, is broken down into departments and camps. Could you explain this organization a little bit so that our listeners have a better idea of how they can look for perhaps a local camp? Yeah, so like you said, we're broken down. We have the national level, which is nationally. Departments are typically the state level. There are some departments that have multiple states in them. And then your camp level is your local level, the town or county-based level, if you will. In Rhode Island, there's 4 camps. So we kind of, but there are other departments that have 15, 20, 30 camps in them, just because, like, the Department of California has, I think, 25 camps in them. Pennsylvania's got a bushel of camps in it too.
I think they got 18 or 20. But that's one of the things that, what we tend to do is we'll find a contact for, say you guys were looking to join, we'd be like, okay, like, where do you live? Okay, well, here are the camps that are geographically close to you. And then we'll say, okay, which one do you want to join? We're not going to, each camp has their own culture and their own feel to it. Like my camp focuses on cemetery work, whereas, there's another camp in Camp 7 that's out of Providence. They do a lot of displays. So we all have our own bread and butter where we all focus on one thing. So you might be
down Providence. Is that when they say going down Providence? Is that what they mean?
Yeah. So, well, it probably has its roots in the Italian mafia, because the mob was really affluent in Providence in the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
So. I remember hearing that at some point growing up, and then I was like, I asked my buddy who's from West Warwick, right around where you're from, and he was like, "Oh yeah, down Providence." He's like, "That's a real thing." I was like,
Yep.
"Okay."
Yep.
I know nothing about New England, so I just throw really lame pop culture, and I'm like,
well, it's also the fact that Woonsocket, another town in Rhode Island, has a big French Canadian populace, if you will. So you'll hear around a lot of lines like, "Next time you go through my yard, go around," because they're translating French, but to English, and they're not properly transitioning.
I do love that mentality, which essentially means don't go through my yard.
Like, exactly. So, but and the other one is I can't remember right now, but it's something about a penny candy store. Yeah, it's another Woonsocket thing. My mom says it all the time, and I can never remember it. I'm kicking myself in the butt right now.
That's all good, man. You guys with your English and your quirkiness.
water fountain. And a water fountain's a bubbler.
What?
I've heard that before. Yeah.
Water fountains, a bubbler. Yep.
What do you call, is it soda or pop?
Soda.
All right.
It's pop in the Midwest.
Yeah.
Yep.
Something I didn't realize until we spoke is that the SUV doesn't require its members to have had a blood relative in the war. That was something I had always thought that was the case. How does one join the Sons of Union Veterans, and what are the requirements for membership? I know you were just talking about the local camps, but how does the process go?
So the first thing you would do is, like I said, you'd reach out to a local camp. You talk to the membership officer. If you have a direct blood relative that served, you would be what's called a lineal member or a full member. If you didn't, you would be what's called an associate.
Okay.
The only difference between the two is that associates cannot serve as the national commander in chief of the organization. So you can't run the whole gamut if you're not a lineal member. And you can't be what's called a life member if you're an associate, which just means that we have certain people who, lack of a better term, paid their dues up front and they became a life member. There's you can't be that if you're an associate. You can do everything else though. You can be a department commander, you can be a camp commander, you can do all the jobs that everyone else does except for those two things. Believe it or not, a lot of people join the order as associates and then find out afterwards they had a relative that served. That's the case with me and my father. We both joined back in 2003 as associates, and we found within 2 or 3 years we found out that we had ancestors that served. So and then it's just quick paper trail, switch your classification over, and that's that. So we do it accept what are called juniors, so kids from 8 years old to 14, and at 14 you can be a full member. And they have the same, so they also, if you're just a kid who loves the Civil War, you could be a junior associate. If you don't have a blood relative that served, you could be a junior that's a lineal. And we have members that, like I said, from 8 years old all the way up to in their 90s. So,
real quick, you just sort of rattled off a couple different titles and, I guess ranks that you can sort of hold, positions you can hold in the various organizations. What are some of the responsibilities of these various ranks? Being a post commander or a regional commander or something?
Yeah, so there's the camp commander, department commander, and commander in chief. It's those are the people that run that level. Camp commander runs the camp. They're responsible for making sure that we get all of our paperwork on time, both to department, national, and the IRS.
So for when you're doing let's say a cemetery cleanup and people are signing off on it, I'm sure there was materials, things that had cost and stuff like that to them. So when you're doing that end of project wrap up, the post commander's job is to make sure that whatever team did that, they get their stuff in and they turn it into the next rung of the ladder.
Exactly.
Or does it just kind of do like a straight military chain of command?
Yeah, it's very much like that. In your example of if you had to buy something for the group, it would be you bring the receipt in, give it to the treasurer. Treasurer talks with the commander about it. We bring it up at the camp meeting. The camp authorizes the funds.
Cool.
And the camp will vote to say, we agreed to reimburse you X amount of dollars for whatever you bought. The treasurer writes the check. So, but like you said, it's like the chain of command. We have to present, if I have an expenditure, I have to present it to the treasurer. The treasurer then has to bring it up to the camp commander and say, yep, I received this bill. We need to bring it up to the body to see if the body will authorize the funds.
So as far as another responsibility I would wonder about is so when I grew up, my first exposure to the Sons of Union Veterans was I saw you guys marching in a parade, things like that. So there's a lot of public outreach, I imagine, that, how does that get coordinated? Whose responsibility is that to sort of organize the physical presence of the Sons of Union Veterans at things like parades or dedication ceremonies, things like that?
Yeah. So a lot of times we'll form committees, and it'll be 2 or 3 people that'll serve on that committee. that they'll do the legwork for it. Much like a parade where, okay, you'll have, like I said, a committee of 3 people. We'll get, and Rhode Island's so small where we typically, Memorial Day, if we wanted to march in a parade, we'll have 3 or 4 parades just in a 10-mile radius that are going on at the same time where, okay, it's up to that committee to reach out to the parade organizers, find out logistics, and then, break down, analyze that information, present it to the camp and say, hey, we recommend going with the parade in West Warwick. Here's why. And then the camp will sit there and say, yep, we agree with you. Let's go forward with that, with the committee's recommendation. And we'll fill out the forms with the parade committee. And that'll be the person who is on our committee. That's the chairperson of that committee will fill all those forms out. If the camp commander needs to sign something, he'll bring that to the camp commander for the camp commander to sign. And like, that'll be that point person for that project, if you will.
So that's awesome on a local level. So like on a bigger level, I guess the SUV as a whole tries to get together kind of annually every year. So 1, whose responsibility is that to organize? And 2, could you tell us like a little bit about just what a national encampment is, like what it's about, what its focus is?
What it entails.
Yeah. So again, it goes to a committee. We're very big on.
Is there bureaucracy involved in this? I can't tell.
Just a little, maybe.
Yeah, we're very big on the fact that not one person can do the job. You've got to have a team, and that's no different with planning the committee. We have a national encampment committee where they'll select a site for, because the national encampment travels. Last year would have been in Georgia if it weren't for COVID and the regulations down there. The year before it was in Ohio. The year before that it was in Massachusetts, and we picked this national site committee. They'll pick a site based off of packets that departments have presented to them. So if Rhode Island wanted to host a national encampment, Rhode Island would put together a packet saying, here are options for hotels, here are options for sightseeing, here are restaurant options, all of this stuff we would then submit to the national site committee. They then review all the packets and they'll say, okay, Rhode Island in 2024, you're going to host the encampment.
I bet you were pumped in 2018 when it was in Massachusetts. You're like,
it was nice. It was nice. So, and it was, believe it or not, the first one I was able to go to since I had kids.
Oh, so, yeah. You were like, yes, of course. That's why you got to go to it. It was that close.
So it was an hour drive because it was in Framingham, Mass. So,
oh man.
Yep. But yeah, so, and then that committee will go forward and like once they award whichever department gets the encampment for that year, the department will work with National to set up all the arrangements. National will negotiate with the hotels and all of that stuff, the logistics of it. But like we have certain things where, okay, there's in Rhode Island, there's a museum called the Varnum Armory, which has the best Rhode Island military history display in the world. They've got stuff dating back from the King Philip's War. They actually just got in possession of a flag from King Philip's War.
Are there multiple Rhode Island military history museums?
Yes. So that's another rabbit hole, because before the National Guard there were the militias.
Oh, yeah.
And in the early 1900s, the militia got to vote on if they want to stay a militia or join the National Guard. Those that voted to not join the National Guard stayed Rhode Island militias, and they actually still fall under the command of the National Guard, but they're called the Rhode Island Historic Commands.
Wow.
So we still have historic militias that meet, drill, they're in parades. They're just in like Rev War or 1812 uniforms and stuff like that. So believe it or not, one of, or the oldest, I can't remember which one it is, continuously serving militia in the country is in Rhode Island. It's the Artillery Company of Newport. They got their charter from the king in 1741, and they've been continuously serving ever since.
See, I make a little joke, and we just got that awesome side rabbit hole. Sometimes rabbit holes can be a good thing. Matt and I try to avoid them because we're both we get lost. We're like owls. We just get to a crazy world we go into. But that was a good one, man.
Yeah. Well, it was a good observation, too. I mean, a lot of those old militia companies date back to when we were still colonies.
Exactly.
And oftentimes are ye old artillery company, that sort of thing.
Real quick, how did between the G.A.R. and the SUV, I know that the G.A.R. did encampments and stuff. I've seen some really cool posters about late 19th century encampments and things like that. Yep. How did they sort of interact with or affect our nation in the military during times of war? I see a lot more, I guess when I'm antique store, hopping, I see a ton of national encampment posters for the Spanish American War era. And a lot of them have Spanish American War imagery. Same thing for the Great War and same thing for the Second World War. What is sort of the encampment situation, or I guess the organizational interaction during times of war in those moments, late 19th, early 20th century?
Yeah. So, we as an organization, we try to help all veterans and all American servicemen. So at that time, you see a lot of, and even with the G.A.R., we'll go to Span Am, like you were saying, the Span Am War guys. There are a lot of photos and a lot of accounts where when the Span Am War guys came home, it was the G.A.R. that was stepping up and saying, "Hey, brother, how can I help you?" Yeah. You're transitioning from combat to civilian life. I'm going to help you. So they did
even today. We're seeing that today.
Exactly. And that is something where we do have quite a few members that are veterans in our organization, that when a younger vet comes in, you'll see the older vets go over to that new guy and say, "Hey, how are you doing? My father's a Marine vet and he does it all the time." We've got quite a few, in my camp alone, we've got three, I think three war, either Iraq or GWAT veterans. And, my dad's come over to him and just, "Hey, what do you need? What can I help you with?" So we see that internally, but you also see that externally, where some camps, some departments will go to the VA home. We're constantly running drives to get simple things you want to think of, like toiletries, to bring to the veterans home, the Rhode Island Veterans Home in Bristol, which the veterans homes all started because of the G.A.R.
Right, exactly. Well, and that goes back to what you were saying about the Potter's Fields and the places for burial. A lot of these soldiers' homes had their own little cemeteries specifically for these guys. Exactly, and so it's a lot of the camps and departments will help out there as much as they can. We've got, like I said, we will. Us as a camp, our camp will make sure that regardless of what war you served, if we're flagging a cemetery, if you served, you got a flag. It's not, "Oh, we're only doing Civil War guys." No, it's, and for a while, and part of it is because of just supplies. We don't have this. We didn't at times have the supplies to flag everyone. Well, now that we have the flags and we have the supplies, we got to make sure they're all remembered.
Yeah, because that makes sense, because the if you're doing a Spanish American war grave, that's likely the son. That could be the son of a Civil War veteran. There's especially in that context that we've spoken about a bunch, there's immediate direct ancestry there. Those guys are right removed from the
not even, I mean, there's multiple instances where you had brothers in the SUVCW who were also comrades in the G.A.R. because their father, they signed up to fight the war with their dad. And so when they were like, "Oh well, I can join because I'm a son of a veteran," I would have loved to have been to one of those meetings just to see the interaction with, okay, you're in an SUVCW meeting, but you're a member of the G.A.R. too. Like how it would have been an interesting dynamic. But like you said, it's that connection is there. It's not just, I have a strong military upbringing. My grandfather was in the Army for 41 years. My dad was a Marine.
Wow.
I had my four of my five great uncles served in World War II. I mean, and it just goes like I can date. We can track all the way back to the Revolution.
Lieutenant Dan, you guys have Lieutenant Dan experience?
Yeah, we have Lieutenant Dan experience.
Nice.
Except for only one of them was an officer, and it was my grandfather. He was a warrant officer. Everyone else has been enlisted. But yeah, no. So it's we can trace it back, and it's actually funny because on my mom's side, her ancestors fought for in the Revolution for America. My dad's side, well, he was British.
That was my family. We had a bunch of Hessians.
We didn't talk about that before we started this show. This is America. It's like, I'm just kidding. I mean, it is America. I'm not kidding.
Well, it's funny because my mom's ancestor was actually at Concord. So,
wow.
And so when I go there, it's kind of cool to see, when you go to the bridge and you see, okay, well, this is where the Patriots were shooting at the British. Like, like I sit there and I chuckle a little bit. I'm like, you guys went into a fatal funnel against all those marksmen. Yeah. and my ancestor was one of them. Like it's one of those things. And it's like, it's a cool sense of pride in my family where it's awesome. Like, yeah. So, but yeah, it's, we definitely make sure to try to take care of all veterans. Obviously we focus on Civil War ones. But we try to make sure that they're all not forgotten.
I just think about the imagery when you just kind of described how you could be like, involved in both organizations right around the time of the Spanish-American War. Like I remember seeing like a photograph of like, I think it was like 4,000 Civil War veterans marching in a like send-off parade for like Spanish-American war soldiers. And like, it's such an insane visual to me. And like, in like a positive, I use insane in this like, wow, like, positive way, but like those guys are, they're getting up there. They're probably like your grandfather's age at that point, but they're still out there. That brotherhood's still there. Like it never leaves. Like I personally have never served in the military. Like I'm just a student of it from stateside, from home. But I've shared brotherhoods in different ways. Like I grew up an athlete, things like that. I played in bands, and like those friendships, if they're true and deep, they never leave. But there's nothing in my studies that I've been able to, I guess, surmise about like what experiencing war and military life together is like, and it's just really fascinating to see the generational handoff that's taking place specifically right at the end of the 19th century with that, because even though we have the Indian wars that we engage in, the Civil War is like the last like huge national moment, and then the Spanish-American War is like, hey, now it's yours.
So I don't know if you guys have ever seen this photo or not.
I love that photo.
Yeah. Yep.
So
it was featured in Military Images too. Couple issues back.
Yeah, it's a great photo, but it speaks exactly to what we're talking about, where you've got the Civil War vet, the Span Am War, World War I, World War II. I don't know the context of the photo, if they're family or if they're just all from the same town.
I think they're family. Yeah, I think there are four generations of family.
But yeah, it still speaks to the fact that the Civil War guys, when they got home, they made sure they made it their duty to make sure that other veterans coming home were taken care of. And that's something the SUVCW has taken over. And we do try to make sure that that the guys coming home today are taken care of the best that they can be.
Well, with the work you guys have been doing for veterans and also for memorialization of the nation's fallen across the board, have you found it, and I apologize, this is dialing back a little bit to one of our earlier conversations, but have you found it difficult with your graves registration database? You've got such a wide range of not only, okay, we've got unknowns and we've got guys from multiple different states, but we also have a lot of variation in what those units are called. One of the examples that I have in Frederick, Maryland, I would go out and place flags just on my own. The cemetery, the big cemetery in Frederick, does a great job placing flags, but they don't always understand all of the abbreviations on the headstones. And we'd have Potomac Home Brigade guys who would not get flags. Well, that's essentially Maryland National Guard at the time, and so I would just dunk flags for them. Are you running into that same issue?
We at the national level with the database, yes, there are a lot of people who they'll see it and they'll we actually see two instances of it. We'll see, like you said, with the Potomac Home Brigade, where they're like, okay, what's that?
Right.
And then we'll also see it where we get people who put in and the stone says captain on it. And the person assumes they served because the date range is right and they have captain in their name. Well, no, they were
a pirate instead.
You make the joke, but no, they were a vessel. They were a captain on a vessel, but not on the U.S. Navy, and they had captain on their tombstone. Like you said, a firefighter could have been a police officer. Anything, they see the rank and they assume, okay, the person served. Let's get them on the database, and there is a lot of cross-checking with that to make sure that we get the names that are on there are proper. We also have there again a committee that every time something gets submitted, it gets reviewed. And we try to educate the people who are submitting things the best that we can. There is a handbook that we actually have for submitters, so they can learn some of that stuff. Okay, you might see PHB on a tombstone. Well, this is what it could stand for, but let's do a little bit more digging and find out and confirm. Because that's only part of the job, just getting in there, taking the photo, and being like, okay, it's at street X and plot Y at such and such cemetery. It's like, well, yeah, you've got to, where did they serve? When did they serve? Let's find out that soldier's story and make sure that gets documented as well.
Awesome stuff, man. Well, before we wrap up and get out of here, let's transition. Let's talk about you a little bit, my man. Let's start with my simple, easy one that I like to throw out there. Like, how did you get into history? Like before making the jump to your professional, work with fraternal organizations and stuff. Like I imagine you started as just a history nerd, like all of us. Like, how did you get into the subject of history?
So, my dad's a Marine. I don't know if I've mentioned that or not.
Semper Fi.
I didn't grow up watching normal shows. I'm actually named after two of the TV characters in MASH.
There you go.
Yep, I'm named after Hawkeye and BJ. When I asked him why my middle name is Joseph and not John after Trapper John, he said, well, Trapper John left the show. But one of the things that I watched when I was younger was Gettysburg. And right there, fell in love with the Civil War. So I was 6 years old when I first saw Gettysburg. It had come out probably 2 or 3 years prior to that. In quick succession, watched Andersonville and Glory. And at the time I was watching Andersonville, I didn't realize I had an ancestor that was at Andersonville.
Low-key, Andersonville might be the most historically accurate Civil War film ever put out. Like,
that's amazing.
Low-key?
No.
How? No. Like, there's so much. I mean, there's a lot wrong with that.
There's a lot.
But like, in terms of the things they get right, I think they check more boxes than most films in terms of correctness.
And another.
I'm just saying.
Another fact that they got in there that I didn't want them to get in there is when you see the Raiders of Andersonville, you see one of the guys who's an artillerist, and that guy's a Rhode Islander.
Wow.
Yep.
I couldn't stand the Burdan and the leprechaun green frock coat. Like, that was a little bit too much for me. That guy looked more like he was looking for a pot of gold than, running the coat. But, other things, they, especially uniform-wise, they got right pretty good.
He was the original Lucky Charms mascot.
That's right. That's why he was so angry. They stole his Lucky Charms. That's right. Bastards. But, so you saw,
Saw Gettysburg. So when I was 6, started researching it and started reading it, anything I could get my hands on that was Civil War related. Probably like most people at the time, my favorite, Civil War person was Chamberlain from, sure, because of the movie. Did a lot of research on him. And then, I actually, my new favorite general is Frank Wheaton. He was the second Rhode Islander. Mm-hmm. Took over the second when Slocum was killed, when Colonel John Slocum was killed at Bull Run. Quickly made it up, got promoted, was eventually division command in the 6th Corps. There's a town in Maryland named after him. It's Wheaton.
Wheaton, Maryland. Yeah, dude, I buy guitars there down at Chuck Levin Music.
Yep. Wheaton, Maryland is named after Frank Wheaton.
I had no idea. I'm from Montgomery County, Maryland, like right where that is. Like, I'm from a town over. I had no idea.
Did you know that Joan Jett went to Wheaton High School?
No, and I love rock and roll. Dive in the jukebox, baby. Just saying. But no, like, that's I didn't do that on purpose. Like, that just happened that way. But like, for real, like, I didn't know that she's a local girl either. That's awesome. I'm a Bruce Springsteen guy, and Nils Lofgren, one of his guitar players, is from Montgomery County as well. So like, that's been one I would have known the answer to that one.
Yeah. So it was crazy when I stumbled across that. I don't even remember how I was driving through Maryland. I have family down there and was going to visit them. And I'm like, Wheaton, Maryland. Oh, okay. Get to where I'm going, pull out the phone, go on Google. And I'm like, Wheaton, Maryland. And right in there, oh, yep, named after Frank Wheaton. And I'm like, Wheaton High School. And then you go click on Wheaton High School, famous students, Joan Jett. Like, wow. It was crazy to get that. I had
no idea. I'm so pumped.
But it's one of those things where people don't realize that there's so many connections to the Civil War. I mean, even just driving down the road and you look at, okay, there's Burnside Ave. Okay, there's Sykes Ave. Right. There's so many street names that when I drive around my local town that it's okay. Oh, Sales Ave. Yep, Sales was there was a guy at Fredericksburg in the 7th Rhode Island who got his arm blown off. His name was Sales. I'm like, oh, well, he was an officer. Yeah, it was probably named after him. Things like that where you and people don't realize it because it's been 155 years, but it's still.
What did I see recently that it's sort of, what is it? I saw somebody post on Instagram a history that like the Green Berets can trace their roots back to a specifically Rhode Island unit.
Yep, 2nd Rhode Island.
I was like, how? Like the Green Berets are from Rhode Island? Like what?
So believe it or not, 19th Group is, so I want to make sure I get the unit delineation right. 2nd Battalion, Company A, 19th Group Special Forces is based in Rhode Island. They get their heritage from the North Providence Rangers, which was a Rhode Island militia unit that fought from the Revolutionary War all the way up.
That's awesome.
That is very awesome.
Yep. So they have
little states, big history.
Yeah.
Yes. So, but yeah, that particular company has battle honors from Rev War, Civil War. Specific, they were in the 2nd Rhode Island, the North Providence Rangers. So, they can trace all of that stuff back. Yep.
That's awesome. So how do you make the jump then, going from history nerd to working in, like, I know that you're working in a fraternal organizational field, but there's a ton of history surround, like even though you're working in a fraternal charitable organization, like it revolves around the history, right? So like, how do you make that jump from just like nerd to working professionally?
I joined when I was 14. My dad came across a guy in his work that was in the Suns, still is in the Suns today. And the guy was like, hey, I know your son loves history because they talked about it. And it's like, I'm in this group that's about the Civil War. Would you be interested in coming and joining? like, yeah, my dad pitched it to me. I was like, yeah, sure, let's join. The running joke is that I'm the more senior of the Frails in the group because I was sworn in first.
Nice.
Which makes conversations at national really confusing to people because my dad is the junior vice commander in chief currently. So
you
when
lord that over your dad, though, you're like, I'm technically yours, you know,
all the time. So like we'll sit there and so like even when I nominated him for the junior vice commander in chief position, I said in there, even though I am the more senior of the two Frails.
Good for you.
Nice.
Good for you.
But yeah, no. So we joined. Like I said, I was 14 years old when I joined. I was just old enough to be a full member. Joined as an associate. We didn't realize we had someone who served in the war. My dad did some digging, found Hugh. And then unfortunately, when my grandfather on my mom's side, my mom's dad passed away, we got his birth certificates. And my dad just on a whim was like, let's do some digging. And that's how we found John and Richard. And, you know, I was in the Suns before I started reenacting. I met the person who I started reenacting with in the Suns. A lot of the people who are in the Suns have reenacted at one time or another, but you don't have to reenact to be a member of the Suns. And I feel like a lot of people don't realize that. There's a lot of people in my camp. We've got 30 people in my camp. I think only 7 or 8 of us reenact. The rest of us just do the cemetery work. We do the school presentations. It's not about wearing the wool. It's about doing the other things to memorialize these guys. And, you know, I fell in love with the work. I fell in love with going into a cemetery and cleaning it up. When I graduated high school, I was one of 430 in my graduating class.
It's a big class.
For Rhode Island.
Yeah.
Where I'm from.
From Montgomery County, Maryland. Apparently we have a lot of people that live there.
But my graduation ceremony from high school was 4 hours long. So I said after that, I was like, the next time I walk the stage will be if I get my doctorate. So when I graduated with my bachelor's, I was in a cemetery cleaning it up. I wasn't at my college graduation. It's where I wanted to be. It's where I take a lot of pride in doing that cemetery work, and the feeling you get when you lift a stone and put a stone back that's been off of its foundation for decades is right. There's no other feeling like it. It's such a good feeling, good experience to have. And it's giving back to your community in a way in which, you know, people don't think to. You know, it's everyone drives by the cemeteries and drives by these things that are run down, and everyone's like, oh, that sucks that it's in that condition. Yeah, it does. Well, we actually go in and we do something about it, and a lot of our camps go in and do something about it. You'll see on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, a lot of what we post it's either school demonstrations or cemetery work. You know, that's really a lot, you know, and it goes right with the graves registration aspect of it, because yeah, we got to clean the cemetery up to find the graves. We get into the cemetery, then we document that they're there. We get their names into the database, get the photos of the graves into the database. And now when we're putting the photo into the database, it's not a grave that's fallen over. It's a grave that's upright and you know, that veteran can be proud of and be properly remembered.
What specifically do you do as the National Patriotic Instructor, you know, for the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War?
So I have 2 roles. The first is that we have an in-house training called Memorial University for anyone who's a member. And it's just the basic ins and outs of the order. And I'm the director of Memorial University. I get all the submissions, grade the papers, and make sure that those who complete it are properly recognized. The second thing that I do is I try to educate the Brothers of the Order on patriotic themes. You know, it's not necessarily waving the flag and being patriotic in that sense. It's, you know, I like to focus on, I mentioned it earlier with community work. I'm a firm believer that if you have a strong community, the state and country will get better because of it. So it's with everything going on right now with COVID, it's this year has just been, this past year was, hey, I focused on check on your neighbor, check on your fellow brother, make a phone call, shoot a text, just say, hey, are you okay? Do you need anything? I mean, we've got brothers in the order that are in their 80s. I've got neighbors who are in their 80s. As simple as saying, hey, I'm going to the store. Do you want me to pick something up for you so you don't have to expose yourself if you don't want to?
That actually ties into one of these follow-up questions I have for you here was how has the Sons of Union Veterans, you personally, camp specifically or nationally, like how have the Sons operated during the pandemic, with, things like cemetery dedications being, I imagine either canceled or like massively shrunk down?
It all depends. It all depends on which state you're in. Almost all camps are meeting electronically right now, and using Zoom. We have, when it comes to the cemetery work, luckily it's outside. And, so it's all the studies have said, if you're outside, that's the best place to be to try to, if you do have to gather in groups and
you can distance yourself too a lot easier in that situation.
Exactly. And even when we are close, it's, there's only 5 or 6 of us. It's people that we, a lot of it is people that I still see all the time because, my dad, my best friend is in the order. Like we still see, they're in our bubble. So it's like, okay, you're in my bubble. Like, let's hang out, but let's hang out in a cemetery and let's clean it up. And we'll, granted, it's only 3 or 4 of us, but we're still getting work done. Others have, they come up with, we've actually been coming up with lectures and things of that nature. So like in October, I was actually the guest speaker at the New York Civil War Roundtable to talk about the G.A.R.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That was a really cool experience. But it was, hey, we were able to do our mission, but just like you guys and I are talking right now through a Zoom call. Right. It stinks because we can't get into the schools. We can't get to that younger generation right now. We've had quite a few schools that, because of regulations, have that we go to every single year. They're like, sorry, we can't do it this year because of the, either the schools recommend the schools regulations or the state's regulations. And it's like, hey, like I've even offered, I'm like, I've got Zoom. I can set up a Zoom meeting. I will happily, do a Zoom presentation. It won't be the full gamut. It won't be the full experience or the same experience. And, a couple of the classes or 2 of the schools, at least that I deal with, were like, you know what, if regulations are the same when time comes, we'll definitely use that approach if we have to. Because they understand, the schools understand too, that this is a very valuable service that we provide, that, their kids are getting education that they wouldn't get from a textbook by us coming in and doing this. So, and that's the other thing is that we do it, we go in and we do it for free. It's a free service we provide to the schools. We don't charge the schools anything to do this. Like, so it's one of those things where they're getting a lot of bang for their buck.
So with the pandemic, like not really showing any immediate signs of going away, like tomorrow, like I imagine that this is, like even with vaccines and stuff about to become available and stuff, like, like all the medical experts say, like, we're going to have to wait, be patient. Like, we're going to kind of have to operate in our current status quo until they say otherwise right now, which is probably looking like a good part of next year. How does the SUV plan on operating? Like, what plans do you have? Like, how can you, like, what's it like scheduling, a next season, a next year, in the middle of a pandemic after we've already dealt with it for a year?
Yeah, it's tough.
2021.
I think like everyone, we're taking it a week at a time. We can't really afford to do anything more than that. Like I said, in 2020, we were supposed to have our national encampment in Marietta, Georgia. Well, it got canceled because of the state regulations. We had to have the first ever electronic national encampment where we had over 300 brothers on a Zoom call.
I saw you posting about that on Instagram, doing some of the screen captures and stuff. So it looks like at least it was a success.
It wasn't out. How do you have 300 people on a single Zoom call? Holy crap!
It was, we had two brothers who, they busted their tails off to make it work. They are the webmaster, or not the webmaster, the singles officer at the time, who was Jamie.
You said the webmaster? Spider-Man's the webmaster.
So but the singles officer at the time, Jamie McGuire, and then the chair of the credentials committee, Joe Hall, they busted their tail to make it work, and they did a fantabulous job to make it happen. And with relative, I think the only issue that we had was that for some of the elections we were doing the poll question, yes, no, it would pop up, and that feature stopped working halfway through. And I mean, when you had, so some of the questions we had to ask, then the two of them had to say, okay, if you're voting yes, raise your hand. And they had to scroll through the participants list to count by hand everyone who voted yes.
And then, meanwhile, Jerry's not sitting at the computer for a second. And you're like, Jerry! And then it's like, Bob, can you hit mute? Please, Bob. Somebody tell Bob muted, and Bob's like, talking about takeout. That's why I'm like shocked you had 300 people on the call, because I do a morning Zoom call every single day at work. There's 33 people on it, and it is a S show completely every single morning. So when you said 300, I was like, dude, disaster. That.
Well, I was thinking the same thing, because we have, I work in healthcare IT. That's my 9-to-5 job. So we've been since April or March of 2020, we've been working from home exclusively. Yeah. So all of our meetings are on Zoom. Every quarter, our whole IS department gets on a call, and it's 200-300 people. And you have the same thing where you got people who forget to mute, and people who, this, that, and the other thing. And it's just,
and these are the IT folk.
Yeah,
exactly. So it was one of those things where I'm sitting there and I'm like, all right, we got a lot of people in this organization that do not know how to use computers.
Oh man,
work. But like I said, part of leading up to the encampment was we had test sessions where we actually, Joe and Jamie grabbed 70 people who, by random. And some of them were people who had no idea how to use Zoom before, had never used Zoom before. And it's like, okay, guess what? You're getting a crash course today before the actual national encampment.
You're going to learn today, son.
Exactly. And
that's smart, though. It really worked out.
It did. It was, like I said, it was great. I mean, it stunk being on a Saturday, being in front of a computer screen for 8 hours. Sure. The national encampment is traditionally 2 or 3 days. And we pride ourselves in being a fraternal organization, so we couldn't see each other. We couldn't grab a beer after the encampment. We couldn't get lunch with, I've got friends that, there's a guy in California who's a past commander in chief, Tad Campbell, that him and I had, every time we get together at a national encampment, we play chess together. Stuff, the small things like that we couldn't do. So that stunk, but we have the option of that if we have to in the future in 2021. I hope we don't have to. Like I said, we are a fraternal organization at heart, where seeing everyone and the interaction with everyone is some of the best things that this organization has to offer. I mean, I've got friends all across the country because of this organization. And my closest friends are in the order and in my camp. So to not be able to see them would stink. But, you got to do what you got to do. And if we got to meet through Zoom, we'll meet through Zoom, and, we'll continuing trudging forward. And hopefully this year with the vaccine, hopefully coming out soon, we'll be able to have some progress and to be able to get back into the field more regularly. So with another thing the pandemic killed, you mentioned, being a reenactor. Matt and I both also do that. How long have you been in the hobby? And how have you seen it change? And what direction do you think it's going? So this would have been my 18th season had we actually had a season.
Yeah, ours killed too.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah, we had a couple of small events. We're actually really lucky. Right down the road is the Nathaniel Green Homestead in Coventry, like 5 minutes away from my house. And they let us drill there. My reenacting unit, the 2nd Rhode Island, they let us drill there whenever we want. So we were lucky. So we were lucky where we were able to get in there a handful of times just to keep the rust off. But actual events, there was nothing. And it stunk because as each month came through, you're like, oh, this event's not canceled yet. And then a week beforehand, it's like, nope, it's gone. It's like, so, it took a big hit. We're hoping that this year, again, that on the reenacting side, that things will be better with that. But, only time will tell.
Matt and I, at one point earlier this year, got such weirdness out of not being in the hobby before we learned to embrace the random break we're getting. Because Matt and I have both been in it for a really long time too. So personally, I am enjoying the fact that we haven't had a season at this point because I've had weekends free. I've been hanging out with my family. I got a young daughter, just like you have some young kids. So all these things, I'm I didn't realize how much of my life this hobby takes up any given summer. Yeah. So I'm enjoying it, but at one point, Matt and I were going a little stir crazy with the fact that it was May. Yeah. We hadn't put the wool on at all yet. So he and I just threw on our kits and went for a 2-mile hike.
Yeah, you get the itch to put the wool on. You really do, and and that was the same. It was the same thing we did with the homestead where we called them up and it's hey, can we come down just for one day for a couple of hours? They're like, yeah, sure, come on down, and we went. There was 10 of us, I think, where we put the wool on and we just to wear the wool. We did a little bit of drilling to like I said, to keep the rust off. But as far as where I see reenacting as the hobby going, I've seen a large push to go more campaign style and get really authentic, which is great because you're bringing that aspect to it. You're really showing what it was like, but it's just it can be pricey.
Yes.
to get those really authentic kits and like I tell anyone who's looking to join reenacting, you got to start somewhere. Don't worry about the expensive stuff first. Work your way into
it. Exactly.
But luckily for me, with reenacting being off, I was able to focus a little bit more, not just on family, but on the sons and to do more stuff with the SUVCW and, whether it be, I also serve on the promotions and marketing committee, which, this is now going to be our 4th podcast that we've been on nationally.
Awesome. Yeah, you've been hitting some friends of ours. I saw you guys spoke to Untold Civil War as well.
Yep, Paul's a good guy.
Paul's a great guy. Yeah, we spoke to Paul. We just did. We had a Civil War digital digest with Will come out.
I saw that. Yeah.
Yep. So we've been really focusing on trying to get.
He's such a nice guy.
He really is. He's
a genuinely nice dude.
He 100% is, and he's actually. It was funny to see the interaction because with his I don't know if you know what his day job is or not.
Oh yeah, when I first found that out, I was like, "You don't talk to me?" I was like, "That's awesome."
Yeah. But the funny part is that the 3-person committee for the digital digest that we were working on was me, my dad, and Jim Paul, and my dad's a former firefighter as well.
Oh well, there you go.
So it was one of those things where
your dad's like, let me tell you everything about your show that's not accurate.
Before we get started.
Well, here's the thing though. My dad doesn't watch those shows.
Yeah, because they're not accurate.
Because they're not accurate. Exactly. And it's for him. It's and the same thing with a marine movie. It's one of those things where imagine how we are when we watch when we were watching Grant. That just came out. I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, those chevrons are wrong. Okay, that insignia is wrong. Imagine us as historians but for firefighting, where he lived it and all that.
That Grant special, real quick, was such a proud, frustrating moment for me. Like Matt and I, our good friend Avery Lentz was one of the talking heads on that, and Avery,
he does the Battle and Banter, right?
Yeah, exactly, and he made his debut, and he did an awesome job, man. He was one of the best storytellers there, and every time they would cut away, they would show really terrible reenacting, and it's like, dude, you are giving such amazing academic gravity to this chat, but then you're showing us crap, just crap. 3-man columns, 5-button sack coats.
Oh my god! The 3-man column. Oh my god! That was one of those things where I almost turned it off, and I'm glad I didn't. But I almost turned it off when I saw
World War I trenches at Shiloh.
It's like, okay. No, but then the one thing I'm glad they got right on that is, and bringing it back to Rhode Island because born and bred here. But
do it.
But when they show in the third episode, we've got a report from one of Sheridan's scouts. And they show the guy in the Confederate garb pull the capsule out of his mouth and hand the message to Grant. The chief of Sheridan's scouts at the time was H.H. Young, who was on detached duty to Sheridan from the 2nd Rhode Island.
Wow.
Nice.
Joined the 2nd Rhode Island as a private at Bull Run, made it through the ranks, was a company commander, eventually on brigade staff. And then Sheridan plucked him to work on his staff, and then eventually to be chief of scouts.
That's awesome.
And it's to the point where in downtown Providence, where there's Kennedy Plaza, it's the main bus hub in Providence. There's 3 Civil War statues: the Soldiers and Sailors that has all the Rhode Island dead from the war, Burnside, and what they call the Scout, which is a monument to H.H. Young.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
that's super cool. So yeah, shout out to Avery Lentz once again on the History Things podcast. On our first season last year, I think our first 8 episodes in a row, Avery got brought up. And so it was this joke that there was this mandatory Avery Lentz shout out. But here we are again in season 2, talking about our good friend
season 2, right, man?
Avery's a good dude. We love his show. Matt and I obviously have been on Battles and Banter a bunch. And we just did the Fredericksburg program with them, obviously, him and Cody, and that was a real good time. So if you haven't checked that out, make sure you hit Battles and Banter, History Things with Pat, or History Things podcast, Facebook or Instagram. There's a really cool Fredericksburg series of live streams we did. But before we get out of here, man, how can people contact you at the Sons of Union Veterans? I mean, how can people get involved? Social media and all that.
Yeah, so we've got Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're just about to launch a YouTube channel where you can reach us. Just search SUVCW in any of those platforms, and you'll see the national organization pop up. You can message us for questions, and we're very active on social media. The great thing about having these phones is that you can. I probably have a message on or a notification from the national Instagram account on my phone right now that I can just after this swipe up and take a look at. And but like I said, we're all our main accounts for Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, SUVCW. Search on there and you'll be able to find us. And we're posting all the time, whether it be photos, stories of what happened during the war, or something we're doing as an organization. We're, like I said, we are pretty active now on social media. So.
Well, awesome, man. Well, we appreciate you coming by to hang out. Before we get out of here, Matt, any final thoughts, any parting shots you want to take? You want to start off season 2 strong by just throwing shade? I'm just kidding. Any final thoughts?
Just how much we appreciate you coming on, Ben. I know we've been planning this for about a year now because you'd reached out to me specifically last January, basically right as we got the podcast going. Last February, right when we got the podcast going. And so we've had this one in the works for quite a while. I really appreciate you being able to take care of some of the bureaucracy on our end to make it happen.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
Yep.
Of course, no problem. Thank you.
Less paperwork on our show. Right now. Only 2 of us here.
But it's been a lot of fun, and we really appreciate you coming down and spending so much time with us to talk about this really important organization, the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on. Like I said, the Sons of Union Veterans is something that's near and dear to my heart. I've been in the organization for 18 years now. And to say that when you're 32 years old, that you've been a part of a group for more than half your life is, it's
fantastic.
It is. But it also goes to show, how important this work we're doing. Because if it can get someone like me, to join at 14 and to stick around for all these years and to eventually be one of those guys that, I've got a 50-year pin on my badge eventually, stuff like that.
Cool.
It shows you how great of an organization this is. Whether it be the work we do or the friends you make, it's absolutely amazing.
Awesome, man. Well, like Matt said, man, we really appreciate you coming by. Couple things before we get out of here. First, stick around. Season 2 is just now rolling. We just left the station. So with wrapping up with Ben here, that means that quarter 2 is now on deck. Just a little preview of that. We have Kobe Treadway, who is the acting director of the Surratt House Museum in Clinton, Maryland, not too terribly far from Wheaton, Maryland, just to go back to that reference that I can't believe I never knew, being Montgomery County. But he's going to come on to talk about a Civil War related topic that we almost constantly forget is a Civil War related topic, because as a study of the Civil War, Lee surrenders and we tend to go end of the war, and we forget about Johnson and we forget about Kirby and all those other guys. But we also forget, that the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln, the subsequent manhunt for John Wilkes Booth and his conspirators, and the, trial of the conspirators in the
it's going on during the war.
It's going on right at the very end and during the war. So Kobe's going to come on and talk about John Wilkes Booth, the assassination of Lincoln, obviously everything that plays out there, and then the conspirators trial. Tell us a little bit about the museum. So that's exciting. And obviously we'll have you back, Ben, to talk about, or I guess to answer some listener questions, because I'm sure people are going to have a ton of them. And before we get out of here, I'll just say, anything that we can do as a show, to help you guys out. If you ever need us for anything, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, man. If you want to follow along, again, like Brian said, or Ben said here, follow along with the Sons of Union Veterans at SUVCW. You can follow Matt on Instagram at Matt Borders Books. You can follow me on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at History Things with Pat. Or most importantly, you can follow the show on Instagram at the History Things Podcast. Send us an email if you need to or want to at historythingspodcast@gmail.com. And, I'm ready to go, man. We're nice and warmed up. Ben, we thank you for hanging out with us. And we hope that we hope you had the best holidays, and we hope you have a happy new year in 2021. For the History Things Podcast, for your co-host, Matt Borders, I'm your co-host, Pat McGuire, saying we will see you next time.
Have a great night.
Later.
Ready.
You've been listening to the History Things Podcast. Follow the guys on Facebook and Instagram at the History Things Podcast for all the latest news and exclusives. Make sure to also follow Pat and Matt on their social medias at History Things with Pat and at Matt Borders Books. Have a question, comment, or compliment for the show? Send us an email at historythingspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show.